14. And you don't have to stand because I'm going to go and I'm going to work my way and navigate it through here. And so, I don't want you standing for 20 or 30 minutes. But anyway, Matthew 14 starting at 22. And we're going to go all the way to 32 when we get there and it's finished. And straightway Jesus constrained his disciples to get into a ship and to go before him unto the other side, while that he sent the multitude away. Now I'm just going to kind of walk you through this. I've done a lot of studying the last few days and really digging into this, because sometimes what helps me is to just do some history research. And I was sharing with a couple after the first service this morning. They said, well, that really helps. How do you find all this out? And I said, well, first of all, just go and you Google, fishing in the Mediterranean in 34 AD. And it will bring up the historical events about fishing, of how that they lived, how that they breathed, how they fished, and just stuff, just simple, just simple things. But anyway, I got to reading about Jewish traditions and about the fishing villages and about the time and the era and stuff like that. So it helped me understand that when I go back and I read the Bible and see the story about Jesus, now I am sucked into the story and I can see it almost in panoramic 3D about what's going on. And so that way it helps me to be able to come here and explain it a little bit to you. And so, this right here, that the disciples, they didn't own, horses or camels or cars or boats or anything like that. They did not have no Flintstone vehicles. And if it did, it wouldn't have done them much good in this area. That would have been for another area. But anyway, right here where they were at in this terrain, it was a very hilly and a very mountainous and a very rocky terrain. And so the best way was to travel by boat. And I'm just going to tell you, everybody traveled by boat at night. Everybody fished at night, and everybody traveled by night. And primarily the reason for that was, one, it was awful hot there, and so it would be a very hot and miserable trip. Two, the winds would die down and we'd become very calm in the daytime, and so that made it very hard to travel if you're going to go by sailboat, right? You need a little bit of wind to propel you. And so that they would always travel by night. And also they fished by night primarily, was because that the fish during the day, because it was so hot, they would go so deep into the water that you couldn't reach them for nets. So at night, when the water would cool, they would come closer to the surface and they would feed. All the smaller fish would come because there was more oxygen on the top of the water at night, with the wind blowing. And so they would come up there, they would get the oxygen levels would rise at night, and so they would come up and they would get oxygen and they would feed, and then all the other fish would feed on the other fish that was on top of the water. So there was a lot of activity out there. And so that when Jesus, and once that I started to understand that this event took place at night and what was going on, it helped me understand the story more. And because when I first started doing this, it was like, so they rented a boat. They went and they were renting a boat. Now, who goes and has a boat rental facility open in the middle of the night? 2,000 years ago. I mean, that just doesn't make sense. But then the more that I started to understand that the nightlife like this, that's how they traveled. That was their taxi. That's how they got around. That's how they fished. Out on the lake, it was full of boats at night. You looked out there in the day, it was just still as glass and there wasn't a soul out there. But at night, everybody was out there. It was a happening place to be. It was on the lake. And they were out there traveling from one destination to another. And so that once I started getting this in my mind, that Jesus told them, said, look, go rent you a boat and go before me. And so I want to, let you also know that this was not an unusual event about Jesus sending his disciples before him. And so the reason that Jesus would send the disciples before him was that they could go and they could prepare the way. They could go and make preparations, because just like here, when word of Jesus was out that he was coming or was there in that city, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, thousands of people would flock in. And that's where that they see, and this took place in Bethsaida here, and it was a fairly new city, and there really wasn't nothing around it. And yet you see that he fed 5,000 men, not counting the women and children that was there. Well, that town wasn't near that big. They heard, and there was preparations, and there was plan for them to be there, and so then the crowd come to that location of where Jesus was at. And so here, Jesus gives them direction to go here and to make way and preparations, and that he would catch up with them. Now, to give you an idea of why Jesus sent them before was not only make plans and preparations, but he ministered to over 5,000. And when they calculated out with women and children, I think that it was anywhere from 20 to 40,000 that could have been there at this event that was here beside the water where Jesus was teaching. And to minister and to pray for that many people, there has been times that we've had some services and I've prayed for people, and if we prayed for 20, 30, 40 people, 50 people, I was wore out. I cannot even imagine in my mind, 20,000 or 40,000 people that you're ministering to. So, but after this, the reason that they were in this region was that they just got word from the disciples that John the Baptist had been beheaded by Herod. John the Baptist was Jesus' cousin and a dear friend. And so Jesus, just like us, he was hurting. He lost a family member. His heart was broken, and he was struggling with it. And so when we're struggling with things, the things what we ought to do is what? Go find us a place and pray. And so that's what Jesus had in his mind, was he was headed to this area to go up into this mountain region so he could get alone and pray. And yet they heard that he was there, so the multitude flocked in there, and it said in the Bible, it said, and he was moved with compassion. And so he stayed time there to minister to them and to serve the people. Now that he had served them, and after the miracles of the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes there, and he fed all of them, what happens when like after Thanksgiving, we got Christmas coming up, what happens after that you come in and you know Christmas, you can come here, you can be here at 9:30 in the morning on Christmas morning, and you can get your spirit fed, and then you can go home and eat your Christmas dinner and get your body fed, and then you'll just be out for the rest of the day. Complete day. And so that's what happened here. They come in, they got their spirit fed, then turned around and through the miracles of the loaves and the fishes, they got their body fed, and they wasn't in no hurry to leave. And Jesus said, look, you go on over, you make plans, I'll deal with the crowd, I'll get rid of the crowd. And then as soon as he got rid of the crowd, it said, and when he had sent away the multitude, that he went up into the mountain apart to pray. And when the evening was come, he was there alone. But the ship was now in the midst of the sea, tossed with the waves, for the wind was contrite. And therefore, in the 4th watch of the night, Jesus went unto them, walking on the sea. And the disciples saw him walking on the sea, and they were troubled. I want you to mark that word troubled. And they said that it is a spirit. Mark the word spirit. And they cried out for fear. And straightway Jesus spake unto them, saying, Be of good cheer, it is I, be not afraid. Now I want you to know that Jesus did not say, It's Jesus. He said, Be it I. Be of good cheer. It is I. Nowhere did he identify himself as Jesus, and that's important as we go through here. And Peter answered and said unto him, Lord. See, if he would have said, It is Jesus, he wouldn't have said, Lord, if it is you. He asked the question, if it was you. He didn't say, Jesus, because that's you. He said, no, Lord, if that be you. And Peter said, and they answered in him, said, Lord, if that be thou, bid me to come unto thee on the water. And again, he said, come. Jesus did not say, it is I, Jesus, come. And then when Peter was come down out of the ship, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. But when he saw that the waves were boisterous, he was afraid and began to sink. And he cried and said, Lord, save me. Lord there, in this Greek tense, was a very intimate and personal. He was saying, Lord, save me. He was calling out to him directly. And immediately Jesus stretched forth his hand and caught him and said unto him, O thou of little faith, wherefore didst thou doubt? And when they were come into the ship, the wind ceased. Now, there are some things that I want us to make mention here, and that we need to get a picture of what's going on here, is because there's three words that I actually wanted us to make mention of, and the first one was wind. So we have the word wind, and it's the word wind is aeroneamos, and it means a violent agitation and a stream of air. It is a strong, direct wind that they were fighting against. Now, if you look at where they were Bethsaida, they were going west. So they were going against the jet stream. They were going against the wind. I mean, and anytime you go against the wind, you have some struggles. But see, Jesus spoke to them and told them to what? Go against the wind. Go against the jet stream. You know what I thought was amazing, that when you fly and you go from here and you go east, it's always faster than when you turn around and you make the same plan back going west. It always takes longer. And so, you know, it's the same way. When we went to India, I mean, it was like a 20-hour flight, 21 hours total getting over there. Coming back, it was like 27, 28, something like that. I mean, that plane ride sure felt a lot longer too. But anyway, you know, it always, you're going against the jet stream. So, you know, when they would, at night, you know, the winds would die down, and the idea was up in this area, in the Sea of Galilee, in the northern area of it, that the winds would whip in there, and the sailors, even though there was some wind in there that would come in there on that going west to east, they could use it, turn their sails, and as the wind curved in that cove, it would propel them, and they could go west against the wind. But for this night, there was a strong agitating wind. There was a wind that was just all blowing back and forth, and that was just tearing it up, and they couldn't make no way. They were actually having to row their way. Now, I think it is in Mark's gospel, and I'm not for sure, but it's either Mark or Luke that recants this, that actually tells how far out into the lake that they were. Because here it just said that they were out in the midst, or in the middle of the lake. And so that with them, and I think it's in Mark, and I'm not really for sure, so don't get me on this, but you'll be able to look it up and find it. It actually gives the distances that is out there, that they were like 5 and 20 something furlongs, which was about 3.5 miles, that they were out in the middle of this lake fighting this storm. And now something else that I want us to know, that Jesus departed and he went up to the very top of this mountain, and he's up here on this mountain, and it says that he was up there alone and that he's seen them out in that lake. Now, if you was to get on Google Maps and you look at this area and this terrain, he was probably a good mile or two up on this mountain away from the water. So I don't know about you, now he's looking 5 miles in the middle of the night to see this boat. So I think there's some other spiritual principles that we see here. Jesus was up there and he was praying. And when he was praying out there, he seen them spiritually out in the middle of the lake and seen them struggling out there. And as soon as Jesus seen them struggling out there, Jesus started already making his way to them. Now something I want you to, now that we got that settled, I want us to look at the word trouble. Because the word trouble is atasteso. And atasteso means that you are shaken to the core. That something has just rattled you to the core. It has totally knocked you off guard, and it has just rattled you. Now, how many of us has been scared? Somebody jumped out and said, boo! And you just become scared. And you're rattled. You know, and I told in the first service, and I'm going to just kind of go in through this very quickly, but I had a guy that worked for me, and he was scared of werewolves. Out of everything in the life to be scared of, he was scared of werewolves. And he was just deathly afraid of werewolves. Yeah, go figure. I mean, some people scared of clowns. You know, some people scared of dogs or cats or spiders or so. He was scared of werewolves. And if you put on a werewolf mask, he'd lose all bodily function. And I mean, he just could not handle himself. He was just scared of werewolves. And so I had a couple of guys that also worked with me that knew this and thought that we're going to get them. And see, our plant was set up on an automatic system. It done call-outs, and the computer monitored the plant at night. And so these guys had this plan. Hey, we could go in there and we could mess with the parameters, the settings, and it would set off, and this guy was going to be working that night on call-out, and we could set up and we could make an alarm go off, and he will have to go in there to take care of it. And see, so we had at the water plant there, it had a hallway in the basement, and it had a glass wall on both sides. You know them glass bricks? The square glass bricks? It was on this side, and it was on the other side of that basement hallway that was there. So you could literally, when you're walking up to the front of the water plant, you can see through there, and at night, the light in the back on the back dock, you can see all the way through to the back dock. It's kind of fuzzy, but you can see. And he had made mention once before that he swore that he's seen somebody walking back there on that back side one time. So these guys had this idea, this is the night the werewolf's going to get this guy. So they set him up, and they put in the plan, and it worked. He come into work, he answered the call, he's walking up to the stairs, somebody's on the other side of that glass out there where that light's shining, and they move across there, so now he sees a shadow. Uh-oh, there's a shadow moving back there. So now he's getting ready, and he's going to start to climb the stairs a little bit faster to get inside. And their stairs were concrete stairs, and they're hollow underneath. It's just like industrial stairs. Somebody else was on this side of it, and they were waiting for him to run up so they could reach out and go, "Roar!" and grab a hold of him. And he got about 2 steps or 3 steps up that stairs because he's seen that thing there. They reached out to grab him, and they make the roar sound. And he just about loses all bodily function, and he turns and he runs the other direction, and they could not stop him. Jana knows who I'm talking about. Probably. But anyway, he was rattled to his core. I mean, his breathing, he lost control of his breathing. He lost control of everything else in him. Because he was that rattled to the core. And when I started looking at this and I started reading this definition, this is the story that I had in mind, because this is what this word in the Greek, it doesn't just mean that we were frightened. It doesn't mean that we were just really scared. We were troubled. We were in such trouble in our spirit that it just totally just took us out of control. I seen a grown man one time squeal like a little schoolgirl over a spider. I mean, I could not give my voice that high. And he just, and then when he did and everybody was making fun of him, I didn't sound like that. It was like, you sure did. But the point is when we're rattled, when we're taken off guard, when we're scared, we do things uncharacteristics of us. And so that's what I want us to get this in our head, that's what's going on right here. These guys are out in the middle of this sea. They've been fighting this wind for hours now, toiling, rowing, and all of a sudden they look up and they see something out there and they are rattled. They are scared. And so what are they seeing? What's scaring them? They called it a spirit. But if we look at that word spirit there that we see, it's phantomteos ama. And that word phantomteos ama is where we get our English word for phantom. And so it actually, in this word right here, it's only used twice in the Bible, but it was very commonly used in Greek mythology, in Greek understanding, in Greek myth. So everybody else at the time knew exactly what this word meant. And this word, it meant a ghost or an apparition of somebody that was dead and that had moved on. Now see, the Jewish always believed, and the reason that Jesus waited 3 days to come back from the dead is because they believed that if you did not wait 3 days, that the spirit could be still attached to the body and that it could come back to life. And so that's why Jesus even waited the 4th day for Lazarus. It was to prove a point that he was dead. And so that here, one of the myths, and when I was studying about fishing and the time, one of the big things and one of the big stories and one of their big fears was when they was out in the middle of the storm, in the middle of the night, if they seen a ghost or if they seen an apparition from somebody that was walking on the water, that was an omen. It was a sign that their ship was fixing to be sunk and that they had a last few minutes that they could make things right or do whatever they had to do in their lives because they were going down. So when they seen this out there, it wasn't the storm that they were scared of. It was this apparition out there that they seen. And I think that is also in Luke's or John's gospel. It said that Jesus was walking on the water and was walking by them as he was going to pass them by until they hollered at him. And so that kind of goes on to just tell that what was going on here. Jesus had already started their way, but here he is. He just kind of casually walking on the water. Why is he walking by them? And then why are they so troubled? Why are they so afraid? And see, that's why Peter, he's asking the questions. God, Lord, is that you? Jesus, is that you? Because he's wondering, is this a spirit? Or is this Jesus? Is there something out there? And see, Peter, it's just as soon as he said, come, he didn't even say, are you sure it's you? He just bailed ship. Why? Because he thought that ship was going down. He thought, I got to get off of this thing before I can't understand why nobody else ain't jumping off this thing. This thing is going out. We've already seen our sign. We already know what the story is, and we got to get out of here. Whatever is in front of us is better than staying where we're at. And see, that's where we are in our lives sometimes, is that we're sitting here and we're questioning, God, is that you? Are you sending me? Is that you that's doing this in my life? And then we jump because we figured that it's better off to go than it is to stay. And so when Jesus, and he sat there and he started, and the reason I thought about this, see, Peter already knew that he was in a storm. He'd been in a storm all night long. He already knew the waves were high. He already knew the waves were overtaking the boat. He already knew all these things. So it wasn't necessarily the waves that got him off focused. See, he knew the stories. He knew the myths. He jumped off of there, and there he is for a few seconds, and he's sitting there walking on the water, and all of these thoughts is, oh my gosh, did I make the right decision? Is the boat going down? Should I have stayed on the boat? Oh, is that Jesus? I don't even know if that's Jesus for sure. I can't even really see him. And all of these things started getting into his mind, and then when he started focusing on everything around him, all of a sudden, then he started to sink in his life. Jesus, and he said, oh Lord, save me. And he said immediately, you got to understand the significance of this story is because he was struggling to see who it was out there. And then when he says, Lord, save me, immediately Jesus was at his side. Now I don't know about some of you, but if Jesus was on top of a mountain, which was a couple of miles away, and it was rough terrain, and they're 3 miles out into the ocean, and Jesus said that he started going their way, how long would it take somebody that is good and fit to jog 5 miles? See, Jesus is always closer than what we think in our life. They're still thinking he's on the mountain. They're still thinking that he's up there. And Jesus is always closer in our lives. And so then they started thinking, why did he say, why did you doubt? Why did you have doubt? Why did you let fear come into your life? And it was this right here, because in Mark 6:52, this is also the flip side of this story of Mark's account of what's going on here. He said, for they considered not the miracles of the loaves, for their hearts were hardened. For their hearts were hardened. That's why Jesus told them, and it said them. He called out them. Because right here, they had already seen this miraculous miracle that was laid out before them. They seen all of this stuff, and then Jesus Himself said, go. And so they just stepped out. They did not step out on their own will in their own direction. They stepped out on Jesus' word and Jesus' direction. He told them, He said, go against the wind, go against the storm, and I want you to go and prepare a place for me because I am coming here in a little bit and you need to be ready over there. Every time in our lives we come out and we set our compass, we go to an altar and we give our heart and our lives to Jesus Christ, and then Jesus, we get up with what? A plan and a purpose. God has spoken to us, and He said, live for me, be my light, be my witness, and He sends us out. And then once we go, we're just like the disciples. We lose sight of what we're supposed to be doing. They were out there in that boat for so long, they lost sight of what their plan and purpose was that Jesus had for them. And that was to get to the other side, to make plans and preparations because He was coming. They lost sight of that. They lost sight of what? Let me tell you something. If Jesus speaks to you and tells you to go, let me tell you, all of hell, there is no storm out there that is great enough or powerful enough to stop you from getting to the other side as long as you keep your eyes fixed on that direction and going into the direction that He told you to go. But so often we let things get in our lives and the storm come up and they got so focused on the storm and everything else around them, and then the ghost story broke out and they were so fixated on the ghost story, and the last thing in their mind was doing what Jesus told them to do. And that's how that we are in our lives. We come down, we get saved, we turn our lives over to God, and here we are, we're tromping down through here on the roads of glory, and we're being a good light and a good witness, and then before you know it, a few things come into our lives, a few storms come into our lives, and then a few scary things pop up. There's some of us got a couple of werewolves that's hanging behind something that pop up, and before you know it, we've lost total sight of what Jesus initially sent us out to do. And let me tell you something, if you lose sight of where that you're going to be, you cannot find your plan and purpose if you're in all of this turmoil and all of this trouble. It's hard to see what God has for us when we're struggling with all this junk. It doesn't matter how bad the storm looks. When we go in Jesus, on His Word that He tells us to go, it is greater that is in us than he that is in this world. We are made more than a conqueror through Christ Jesus, and so therefore we shouldn't worry about what kind of storm or winds are up above. There is going to be storms in your life. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not going to put out a cushion there for you to lay in softly on. I'm going to tell you, life is hard, and it's full of a lot of heartaches and a lot of sorrows and a lot of pain, a lot of letdown, and a lot of trouble. That's why that we're not supposed to be part of this world, but just traveling through this world is because we have another destination. Amen. This world is operated and controlled by the prince of this air, Satan himself. And this is his domain. And we're supposed to be just moving on through. But I'm going to tell you something. There's another story that I'm going to go to real quick, and I got a few more minutes, and I'm going to go through it fairly quickly, but in Mark 4:35, and this is another story about them out on the water. And the same day when Eve come, He said unto them, let's go, or let us pass over to the other side. I'm going to tell you something. When you're with Jesus, you're always going to be on the move. You're going to be going and doing something. If you're just sitting still and you're doing nothing, I'm going to tell you, you're not following Jesus. Because following Jesus means that you get up and you follow Him. You do things for Him. You're constantly on the move. And it said, And when that they had sent away the multitude, they took him evening, as that he was in the ship, and there were also with him other little ships. So this again at night, because it's in the evening, and this is late evening, so that means anything after 6 o'clock in the evening, so it's getting dark here, and you see all these ships in the harbor, and they're all getting ready to set to go across the sea. And that there arose a great storm of wind, and the waves beat into the ship, and that so that it is now full. And that word full there is giamizo. And it means to fill or to be full to its entirety. So we see here that this storm had come, and now it is beating. The waves are filling the ship up, and you've got all these guys in there, and they're belling out this ship, and they're trying to keep the water out of it, and yet it's just overwhelming the ship. And so there's a lot of commotion going on here. And he was in the hinder part of the ship asleep. And this is kata ahinda. And kata ahinda is a compound word. Kata is a word that we've used and talked about many times. It means the overflowing, the going down. It gives a direction or an overwhelming. And then hinda means to sleep. So this is to fall asleep where, you have come home, you've had a hard day at work, you've been out there toiling around, and you're just ready for a nap. You hit the pillow and you're out. Bam. Screaming, crying, gnashing the teeth at the kid, don't bother you. You're tired, you're out. This is Jesus. He just ministered to a multitude again. His body was physically wore out, and he went out there, and as soon as he got in that boat, he went to sleep because he knew when that boat ended and it docked the next day that he was getting out and he had to do some more work for God. So he wasn't going to let no storm or anything else that was around him interrupt his rest. Rest is important to us. I used to, when I was so clinically depressed and everything, I could lay awake at night and my mind would just race 90 to nothing, and I would never sleep a wink. I maybe get, a couple minutes here and there, and I'd just watch the minutes tick by on the clock. And then I'd get up and then I'd have a full day's worth of work. And then I'd do that again, night after night after night after night. And I was physically be wore out. Now, I want to tell you something. You find a purpose and a plan and you're doing it for God, you'll have no problem in finding your pillow and hitting it and going to sleep, because you know that God has more stuff for you to do the next day, and that rest is important to you. The Bible says in Psalms, He said that for He gives His beloved rest. He wants us to rest. He knows that rest is important to us, and we see that Jesus right here is finding and taking His rest. In the middle of all the storm, that He is asleep on a pillow. And they awakened Him and said unto Him, Master, carest not that thou we perish? He's saying, don't you care we're going to die? This word perish right here is them screaming out. And it's like it's a death threat. It's a middle of destruction. It's talking about ultimate destruction. And He said, can't you see that we're in the middle of ultimate destruction? And I can just see Jesus like, oh. All right. He arose and He rebuked the winds. So He got up and He said, all right, winds, peace, be still. And then He turns around and He says to the winds, and then they ceased, and there was a great calm. And that when He had said this unto them, He said, why art thou ye so fearful? How is it that ye have no faith? And so the more that I started thinking about that, Jesus was here on this boat. They knew that they had a plan and a purpose. They were going somewhere else to do some more work for God because the Father told them to go do it. And here that they're on this ship, and then they get wrapped up in all of the storm and everything that is going around them. And then this boat is full. Now what happens to a boat when it gets full of water? It sinks. Boats that are full of water, they don't float very well. We went on some canoeing trips that when the boat got full of water, it sank. Ain't that right, honey? That's why she doesn't go canoeing. We've been married 1 year, and on our first year anniversary, we went to Broken Bowl. We rented this a honeymoon cabin down there. We was going to celebrate our first year anniversary. And we got up and we done a 5-mile canoeing trip. And I don't think I maybe got her in a boat maybe once or twice after that. They sent out a rescue party for us and found us in the middle of the night. And we thought that it was the rescue. We thought we had made it to the end and we'd only made it to the halfway point. And we were sunburnt. We had no sunscreen or anything. But anyway, but when your boat gets full of water, it sinks. And so here they seen their boat and they seen that it was full of water. They was in the middle of the storm, and yet they were panicking. I want to point out something to you real quick, that I'm going to tell you that if Jesus Christ gives you directions and you are headed in the way that He has sent you, I don't care how much water comes into your boat, because that boat was not about to sink. And that's why He said, "What are you doing waking me up? Don't you know who I am? I'm the Son of God. And wherever the Son of God is, that boat ain't going to sink. I don't care how much water is being thrown into your boat today. That boat, as long as you got Jesus in the middle of that boat, it is not going down, honey. It's going to stay afloat no matter what." And that's why He said, "Do you not have any faith?" If you have Jesus in your boat today, then you don't have anything to worry about. But I'm going to tell you, if you don't have Jesus in your boat and the storms are raging, then it may be time for us to find a way to put Jesus back in the middle of the boat. It's time to get Him in the middle of the boat. Because with Him, no matter what we face and what we do, we know that we're not going to sink. And that's what we need, is we need that assurance today that no matter what it looks like tomorrow, that we know that we ain't going under. The devil wants to paint your life full of gloom and doom and despair. But I'm going to tell you, I don't care how many waves beats against your ship. If you have Jesus laying in there, I don't care if He's asleep or not and He's taking His rest, you ain't going down. You cannot go down with Jesus in the middle of your boat. Ephesians 1:11, and this is where I'm closing. "In whom also we have obtained an inheritance, being predestined according to the purpose of Him who worketh all things after the counsel of us, or of His own will." When we are not doing our will, but God's will, when we are following Him, when we are taking His direction. And so all I've been preaching and teaching about is us finding our purpose and our plan that God has for us. Our primary purpose is to be Christ-like and be made into the image of Christ. And our secondary purpose will come when we find and take a hold of our primary purpose in life. But if we're not doing that, then we've not bought in to this. Because see that right there where it says obtained an inheritance, that word right there is kalearuo. And kalearuo means to be assigned to or given a private possession. You have been given a private possession. If you have Jesus Christ in your ship, if Jesus Christ is a part of your life, you have been given a private possession. A possession of what? The kingdom of God. You have been given a private possession of the kingdom of God. And in that kingdom, you have been given authority and dominion to work it. What for? To build it and to grow it. And if we let storms or we let things get in our life, we will never be able to fulfill our final destination or purpose, and that is building the kingdom of God. So often